The non-tender deadline was Friday. The New York Mets cut a pair of pitchers and former top prospect Alex Ramirez, and other teams around baseball cut some players who could be very valuable to the Mets in free agency. We're going to talk about everything from the non-tender deadline on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so Friday was the non-tender deadline. The New York Mets did make a couple of moves, a few of them that we could have predicted, and I did talk about on yesterday's show. The main one that I mentioned was Alex Young, and he did, in fact, get non-tendered. Alex Young, of course, had a nice run with the Mets this past season, left-handed reliever, but he was going to hit his second year of arbitration, was projected to make over $1 million. Not that that is the end of the world or the end-all be-all, but if you just think about a guy that's really just depth on your 40-man roster, I'm sure the Mets are going to pick up plenty of guys throughout this offseason on minor league deals that they believe in just as much as they might an Alex Young. You can cut him and not pay that $600,000 he might cost more than the minimum. It made some sense to non-tender him. And Grant Hartwig got non-tendered as well. Hartwig has been on the 40-man roster for a couple of seasons now. Hasn't really had a lot of big league success. Has been shuttled up and down from AAA, but was shuttled up and down even less this year than I think he was prior in 2023. So it's clear that he wasn't really part of the long-term vision for the New York Mets. He wasn't viewed as a piece that would stick around for a long time. So he was non-tendered. Sean Reed-Foley got a new contract. He also was in arbitration, so I'm sure that that contract was probably either a little bit below what he was projected to make or right at it. We didn't really see the exact number on it, but that was a decision the Mets had to make. Should they let him go into arbitration? And they just got rid of that by agreeing to a deal. All the other players on the 40-man roster outside of Alex Ramirez were retained. And that gets us to the big news of the day when it comes to the New York Mets. And that is the fact that Alex Ramirez, a former top prospect in this organization, is now no longer a New York Met. He's going to be turning 22 years old in January. A guy that at one point was ranked as high as maybe, top 5 in the system, even potentially top 3 in the system, I would think, depending on the outlet. I think at one point I might have had him top 3 in the system because there was a point in time where we had some high hopes for what Alex Ramirez could become. You go back to the 2022 season, Alex Ramirez hit 281, 346 on base, 436 slug, OPS of 782. He stole 21 bases. Granted, he was caught 16 times, but there was some hope there. He was, at the time, still not 21 years old yet, playing in high A. Seemed like he was well on his way. He held his own at that level, hitting 278, and he was definitely on an upward trajectory as a guy that's very athletic, could be a quality center fielder someday, as long as the bat was there. 2023, spent the entire year in high A and really struggled, which is why it was a huge surprise last year when the New York Mets protected Alex Ramirez from the Rule of 5 draft because they were worried that another team was going to grab him. There was a lot of talk last offseason about the fact that he had spent the whole winter in the Dominican at the Mets complex, really trying to improve his game, shorten his swing, get himself in a good position to have a bounce-back year. He had a good spring training with the Mets. He had a good start to the season in Double-A, and then he just could not put it together. He hit 210, 291 on base, 299 slug. So just no power in his game, never developed the power the Mets were hoping he would. He wasn't projected to be some 30 home run threat, but you thought with the athleticism, maybe he could tap into 15 home run power one day, drive the baseball, get on base a lot, use his speed, and it just didn't work. The one part of his game that you could commend him for this past year is he did get much better as a base stealer. He swiped 40 bags, only got caught 8 times. Compare that to a couple of years ago when I mentioned 21 stolen bases, got caught 16 times. He has been improving in that category. He is a good athlete, but you're clogging up a 40-man roster spot for a guy that had absolutely no shot at ending up in the big leagues this year. I mean, he would have had to take a massive leap, and you don't want to count a guy out that's still not even 22 years old yet. Maybe he'll find something. Maybe he re-signs with the Mets on a minor league deal and stays in the organization, or maybe he goes elsewhere. Maybe that's what he needs. But a former top prospect is no longer on the 40-man roster. Sure, it was a little bit of a tough decision for the Mets, but again, when you think about your 40-man roster and how valuable these spots are, you just wasted one on him the entire year. If you think at some point this year you are going to be bringing Drew Gilbert and putting him on the 40-man roster, or Jet Williams, putting him on the 40-man roster, even on the pitching side of things, a Brandon Sproat, a Blade Tidwell, a Mike Vassell, those spots are at a premium. And having Alex Ramirez holding on to one of those spots without any hope of reaching the big leagues, it just didn't make sense. You think about where he had fallen now when it comes to Mets top prospects, and I don't even know if he would have been in the top 30 anymore. I mean, it was a really bad season. You think about the pecking order of position player prospects. You got Jet Williams, you got Drew Gilbert and Luis Angel Acuna, and then you have Ryan Clifford. You can rank those four any which way. I'd probably say as a prospect, Ryan Clifford might be the second best in this organization right now. But regardless, those are the four guys that you feel the best about. And then you get into other prospects like a Jesus Baez, Jeremy Rodriguez, these shortstop prospects. Baez moved over to third this past year, but guys that have athleticism, have shown a little more with the bat. You have a lot of catching prospects that the Mets really like. Giovanni Rodriguez, Daverson Gutierrez, some outfielders, Nick Morabito. You got Jacob Reimer, the AJ Ewing. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I could rattle off right now that I think have already passed Alex Ramirez as far as his prospect status, because you're now compounding 2 bad years in a row where that growth just wasn't there. So the New York Mets make somewhat of a surprising decision just because it's a notable name to be cutting ties with, but I think they made the right call here. And then again, as far as the 2 pitchers they cut, they're going to replace those guys, with minor league contracts. Hopefully they're going to sign some relievers to big league deals. Made sense to clear up some room. So now the New York Mets 40-man roster sits at 31. So they have plenty of room to add major league free agents and continue to try to turn over this roster and hopefully put it in a better position going into next year. Now, around Major League Baseball, there was plenty of notable names that were non-tendered. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next segment. Are there any new free agents that would interest the Mets? I'll go through the most notable names in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. It's the weekend. Maybe tonight you want to go out. You want to get out of the house. Check out the Game Time app. Look at Live Nearby, and you can see all of these amazing events that are around you, whether that's a comedy show, a concert, a theater show. Maybe you want to go to an NBA game or an NHL game. All that is available on the Game Time app. And if you use their Game Time Picks feature, you can filter out the fluff, and they'll show you only the best possible deals on great seats. So don't waste your time scrolling through thousands of tickets. And if you download the Game Time app and you create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB, you're also going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're now 100 subscribers away from 11,000 subs. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, I'm going to rattle off some names here for notable non-tenders. I'm actually working on an article for Just Baseball right now, simultaneously, And there was 12 names that stood out. It's going to be a top 10 for just baseball with a couple of honorable mentions. So we're just going to go player by player on some notable new free agents. We'll start with the former Yankee here. Jon Berti hits the market. I don't know if the Mets would have a need here with Jon Berti. He's a utility man who was hurt this past year, only got in for 25 games. But if you go back to what he did in 2023 with the Marlins, he hit 294, 344 on base, 405 slug. He stole 16 bases, got caught 6 times. A year prior, 2022, he actually stole 41 bases. He could play shortstop. He could play center, play all over the diamond. Jon Berti is going to get a pretty nice deal in free agency. He's not going to completely break the bank, but is he going to get a guaranteed major league contract, and it's going to be more than $1 million? I think so. I think he'll get paid a little bit because he does bring so much versatility, and he fills a position that's just barren in this market. There's not a lot of shortstop. There's not a lot of second baseman. So you look at what you could potentially have with Jon Berti. That's a guy that I think a lot of teams are going to be in on to just potentially shore up a lot of positions for them and see what happens. Another guy that's a middle infielder who might have a little bit more of a healthy market because of the lack of other options. It's Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers, 28 years old, won a Gold Glove with the Rockies a couple years ago. He is a really solid defender, good athlete, has not hit much across his career. That's why he's ultimately getting non-tendered here, because he's about to start making a little bit of money in arbitration. But he's not a bad hitter. He's not awful. I mean, career 266 hitter. This past year, he hit 267. On base percentage for his career, 316. Last year, 314. Career slug, 409. Last year, 407. 721 OPS. Obviously, when you're playing in cores, that's not the best, but a guy that can play multiple positions well, has a little bit of pop, has cleared 13 home runs in 3 of the last 4 years, driven in 50 runs in 3 of the last 4 years. Again, has that positional flexibility. I'm sure now that he's away from the Rockies and maybe away from an everyday role, signing on to be a bench bat somewhere, you might see him actually play even more positions. So Brendan Rodgers, another interesting name that just hit the market. Brian De La Cruz, former Marlin, another name to talk about. Guy hit 21 home runs last year, was traded at the deadline to the Pirates. They were excited about it. They've now non-tendered him. I don't know if he's necessarily a fit for the Mets, but he is an outfielder with a little bit of pop. So take that for what it's worth. If the Mets were looking for a right-handed bat against left-handed pitching, Austin Hayes did just hit the market after getting traded for by the Phillies at the deadline. They cut ties. Here's a guy who at times has sort of flashed with the Baltimore Orioles, where it was like, oh, man, this guy can be a real player. 2023, he was an all-star. Hit 275, 325 on base, 444 slug, had 16 home runs. That was his 3rd consecutive year with at least 16 homers. This past year, he really fell off. Hit 255, 303 on base, 396 slug. At one point, he was raking against left-handed pitching with the Orioles and just not doing well against righties. Went over, played 22 games with the Phillies, was hurt a little bit, never really got his rhythm. Austin Hayes is a good player. I don't know if he's going to be an all-star ever again. I would actually doubt that he is, but he's only 29 years old. And again, in this free agent class, Austin Hayes is one of the more notable outfielders. Now, obviously, the Phillies wanted to go another direction. It's understandable, but he's not a nobody. Okay, there's a little bit of heat to that name this offseason, I'm sure, because teams are going to view him as a guy that can rake against lefties, that could be a 4th outfielder potentially. He's going to have some value. All right, going over to another division rival who cut an outfielder, Ramon Laureano. Now, Laureano was outstanding with the Braves. In 67 games, he hit 296, 327 on base, 505 slug, an 832 OPS, 10 home runs, swiped 5 bags, 29 RBIs. He was really good. He also helped the Mets. Remember, he completely botched a fly ball that ended up being a walk-off hit by Jeff McNeil, if I'm not mistaken. So I appreciated him for that in a Braves uniform. It's a guy that early on in his career was an excellent player for the Oakland Athletics. I believe he had a PED suspension in there somewhere, and to be honest, I think since he came back from that, he wasn't quite the same guy. But Still capable of playing all three spots in the outfield, coming off a really good stretch with the Braves. He's going to have a lot of interest. And if the Mets hadn't gotten Jose Siri, I'd maybe say that there could be something there for the Mets. Another outfielder, Mike Tauchman, hits the market. Tauchman had a flatly a good year, I felt. Last 2 years, OPS plus over 105. Solid hitter. Gets on base at a good clip. 2023 got on base at a 363 clip. Last year got on base at a 357 clip. Good outfielder. Like that's not a player you would typically think is going to get cut, but I think it shows you the Cubs are ready to make some wholesale changes. He's going to be 34 years old in about a week here, actually. So I guess that's part of it, right? Wasn't going to be a free agent until 2027, so had a couple years left. He's going to get a major league offer, I think, for sure. Now, as we transition over to talk about pitchers, there are some names that I think would really interest the New York Mets, guys that are hitting the market that could potentially be really good fits either in the Mets bullpen or in their starting rotation. So we're going to go through those names in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, if you like play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you're going to get started $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So find the NFL game that you believe is going to be the most lopsided, or the NBA game. Maybe you're just looking at points for Jalen Brunson and you want to hit the over there. You throw $5 on your favorite bet, and if you win, $150 are coming your way in bonus bets. That's all at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. And during the regular season, you'll have the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day, so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so a lot of pitchers hitting the market that were non-tendered, and there are 6 that jump out to me as interesting fits for the New York Mets. We'll start with Colin Poche from the Rays, left-handed pitcher. I was actually talking about him at the deadline as a potential fit for the Mets. Guy's just had good numbers throughout his career in Tampa. Overall, a 3.63 ERA. You get the last 3 seasons because he did miss 2020 and 2021 with an injury. My assumption would be Tommy John. 2022, he had a 3.99 ERA and 58 and 2/3 innings pitched, 64 strikeouts, pretty good strikeout rate there. 2023 had a 2.23 ERA in 66 games, 60 and 2/3 innings pitched, 61 strikeouts. Really solid stuff there. This is a guy that has pretty reasonable walk rates, good strikeout rates, and keeps the ball in the yard for the most part. So pretty solid pitcher. Last year, 3.86 ERA, 37 1/3 innings pitched, 33 strikeouts. The Rays may have viewed him as a guy that is tailing down from a couple years ago. Who knows? But he's still only 30 years old. Will turn 31 in January. Left-handed reliever. I think he's going to get a major league offer. A little bit surprised that they cut ties. I guess their thought is they're the Rays. Every dollar counts. He was, I'm sure projected to make a decent amount in arbitration. His final year of arbitration last year made $2.38 million. So maybe you think he's going to get a bump closer to $4 million. Not really worth it for the Rays to pick him up, but another team sign him for at least something close to what he got last year, $2.38 million. I think he's going to get a major league deal, and it could be with the Mets. Austin Voth, another reliever that just had a good year. You're just always surprised when guys put up good numbers and they get non-tendered. He had a 3.69 ERA in 61 innings with the Mariners. Struck out 61. It was good. Not great, not amazing. ERA plus of 100, which tells you he was about a league average pitcher. But his WHIP was 1.049. That's really solid. Walk rate 2.7 per 9. That's good. Strikeout rate exactly 9. That's good. Austin Voth, good pitcher. 32 years old. I don't see any reason why the Mets wouldn't consider him, but he's just one of a long list of relievers. There's two that are a little more notable, though, to talk about when it comes to the relief market. Jordan Romano, big name to be non-tendered, but he's coming off a season where he just didn't get on the mound much, and when he did, he pitched to a 6.59 ERA across 13 2/3. But let's rattle off the seasons prior where Jordan Romano was the Blue Jays closer. Now, he wasn't the closer in 2020, but he pitched to a 1.23 ERA, saved 2 games, struck out 21, 14 2/3. 2021, he pitched to a 2.14 ERA, saved 23 games, 63 innings pitched with 85 punch-outs. That is a strikeout per 9 rate of 12.1. 2022, he was an all-star, 2.11 ERA and 64 innings pitched. 2023, an all-star again, 2.90 ERA and 59 innings pitched. He saved 36 games in each of those 2 all-star seasons, saved 8 games this past year. Jordan Romano is a very notable name to get non-tendered. I have to look into the injury and see exactly what it was, if he's going to be healthy next year. Maybe I'm talking out of school and he got Tommy John. I should read into this really quick to make sure. I think it was just the amount of money he was projected to make. Yeah, he's projected to make $7.75 million. And so that's why he's cut here. But yeah, it seems like he should be good next year. So yeah, Jordan Romano is a name that definitely jumped out to me. Kyle Finnegan's the other one. Kyle Finnegan, this past year with the Nationals, was an all-star closer. He saved 38 games. He pitched to a 3.68 ERA. Again, it gets to the risk reward as far as you're not a playoff team necessarily the Nationals next year. Is it worth it to tender a guy that's going to cost you $8 million when you can try to manufacture another closer? I guess not, but man, it's surprising they could never trade this guy. I was stunned they didn't trade him at the deadline. I couldn't believe they couldn't find any value for him. Maybe that's how teams view him. Maybe they just think he's a guy that puts up good numbers but doesn't have great stuff. I don't know. I'm looking at a pitcher here who, over the last 2 years, has saved 66 games, has pitched to a sub-4 ERA every single year. It's not outstanding stuff, but a 3.56 career ERA seems like that's pretty much who he is, a guy that is over 60 innings pitched out of a bullpen every single year. Kyle Finnegan is a name that definitely the Mets should talk to this offseason. Finnegan, Romano, just 2 more good relievers with high leverage experience that just hit the open market. Final 2 names we got, a couple of starting pitchers that I think would fit very well into that podcast I did this past week on 5 under-the-radar free agent starting pitchers. I think these guys just drop right into that. And the first one is Cal Quantro. Cal Quantro was good last year with the Rockies at times. Obviously, you're pitching in cores. The numbers are going to be inflated. 4.98 ERA and 29 starts, but he got to 148 1/3 innings pitched. Year prior, Cleveland wasn't great, 5.24 ERA and 19 starts, but look at the year before that, 3.38 ERA in 2022 across 32 starts, 186 1/3 innings pitched. 2021, he had a 2.89 ERA and about 150 innings. For his career, a 4.07. He's just a good starting pitcher. Cal Quantrill as your 5th starter, not bad. If you can sign Quantrill and you put him in that competition with Tyler McGill and Paul Blackburn and Jose Budo, I think he is the most established starter of that group, and I think he probably wins himself a job. He's been a quality starting pitcher throughout his career. Yes, 4.98 ERA is not great, but again, pitching in cores, and I think he was really good in the first half too, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to pull up the splits here now. Yeah, road home splits actually somewhat even. 5.04 ERA on the road, 4.91 at home. It was actually better at cores. But first half, 4.13 ERA pitching at cores, 102 1/3 innings pitched. Second half, wheels fell off, 6.85 ERA and 10 starts. I would bet on Cal Quantrill to have a bounce back year. He has been cut a couple times now. I can't remember if he was he was non-tendered. I think he was non-tendered by the Guardians and signed by the Rockies, or he was traded to the Rockies. Regardless, a couple times where this guy's contract has forced him out of a situation where a team decided not worth probably $8 million, I would guess, if he got a little bit of a bump in arbitration next year. But still surprises me as a pitcher who could have given the Rockies quality innings again. I like Cal Quantro as a low-risk, one-year signing, back-end starter. I think he makes some sense. And then a guy that maybe has a little more upside, Patrick Sandoval. Left-handed pitcher, only 28 years old, hasn't figured it out, but he's been playing in Anaheim with the Angels. I mean, they are as poorly run of a franchise in Major League Baseball. And you go back to 2022, this guy pitched to a 2.91 ERA in 27 starts, 148 and 2/3 innings pitched, struck out 151. 2023, 4.11 ERA in 28 starts. That's still not bad. Career 4.01 ERA. He did struggle this year to a 5.08 in 16 starts. He was hurt, but man, as a reclamation project for a guy that wasn't supposed to be a free agent until 2027. So if you signed him, you would be able to have him through arbitration again next year. I mean, Patrick Sandoval, to me, as a reclamation project, makes a ton of sense for the New York Mets to just see what they can do. Because at his best, Patrick Sandoval can be a really quality starting pitcher. It didn't work for the Angels the last few years, particularly last season. But I would be all in on Patrick Sandoval as a guy that you are trying to put into your pitching lab. You're getting them with your coaches, your trainers, and you're trying to rediscover what he was because he's only 28 years old. That there's a ton of upside here. So overall, looking at the notable non-tenders across the league, I think the four names that jump out the most to me, you're looking at Patrick Sandoval and Cal Quantrill to help your starting rotation, then Kyle Finnegan and Jordan Romano to help your bullpen. Not a lot of position players that really stand out for the Mets in particular. Across the league, I think there were some non-tenders that will be fairly high up on some teams' wish lists as far as guys that can fill in, whether it be a John Birdie for a utility role, Brandon Rogers up the middle, or if you're looking at some outfitters that had some success last year, Laureano, Tauchman, interesting names that ended up hitting the market. And overall, I think the free agent class got a little bit better. When it comes to the Mets non-tenders, no big names, no surprises. It's not like last year where Louis Guillorme got non-tendered and we were all a little bit taken aback. Alex Ramirez is obviously a little bit of a shock, but as I broke down, it made sense to cut your ties and move forward. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Hope you all have a great weekend. I'll be back with another show on Monday. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. It covers everything, the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.